Hello, everyone. We are live today here at the winter retreat for Tell Me Your Story, and I am your moderator for the evening. My name is Srushti Rao, and I am a freshly minted author. Although I've been an artist for some time now, but that's about me, and that's why this topic that we are going to discuss today is so very uh, interesting, which is colors and covers of winter. Today with me we have Teesta Guha Sarkar from Delhi, nice and wintry, to share her insights on the topic. Hi, Teesta.
Hi, Srushti. Nice to be here.
Yes, same here, and I'm so very excited to talk about this topic in question because writing and art are two of my passions, and cover is where they meet. A book cover is where they both meet, and that's so intriguing for me as a creative professional. Now, just to quickly, warm up and get into the motion of things, I have some rapid fire questions for you. I'm going to throw some words at you, and the first thing that comes to your mind, you have to say that. Um, don't worry, this is to do with winter. So I'm going to ask you some things related to winter, and you just have to tell me the first thing that comes to your mind. Um, what is your favorite winter food?
Apple?
Apple. Okay. Clothing?
Oh, I love winter hats, as you can see.
Yes. Emotion?
Solitude?
Okay. That's very interesting. Solitude in winter. Okay. Song?
Oh, that's a tough one. Probably something by Louis Armstrong.
Wow.
What a Wonderful
Wow.
World, maybe?
That is interesting as well. Um, Final. What's your favorite winter color?
My favorite color in general is white, and so I could easily say that's my favorite winter color too, the color of snow.
Yes, yes. That also, kind of reflects what winter is, but does white really go with theme of books in winter? We'll talk about that more when we get into the detail. Now, tell me one thing. You are a commissioning editor. Tell me, how important is a book cover to a book? They say that don't judge a book by the cover. That's what we have grown up learning. But what is the truth? Do you judge a book by the cover or do you not?
Actually, I don't think they say that anymore. I think people are judging books by their covers. They're becoming increasingly, more important. But first of all, I want to say that it's great to be on this, part of this discussion because commissioning editors get invited to talk about books and writing and the publishing process and whatnot, but we rarely get to talk about cover design, even though it's one of the most pleasurable parts of the job for me. So yeah, I'm looking forward to having a fun chat with you. As to the importance of the book cover, as I was saying, now with the number of books that are being published growing year upon year, it means that it's also somewhat minimizing the opportunity for each book to get noticed, which means it's also become equally important to make sure each book stands out. And in order to do that, the book cover has a great role to play. Although, I mean, a new book gets noticed, for many reasons. The media might want to talk about an exciting forthcoming book. So it might talk about a particular forthcoming book more than other books. A book might have a really unusual title, and that could catch public attention. Or a famous author who might have been on a long hiatus might be coming out of that and bringing out a new book after many years, and people might be looking forward to that. But in a crowded market, it isn't always guaranteed anymore that these factors will always pique public curiosity. So, which is why I think the cover has a crucial role to play, and the more striking it is, and the more easily it can make a book stand out on a shelf, or these days, on an Amazon page, since most
Yeah.
sales are happening on that platform, or even on Instagram. The more interest it tends to generate, because readers are inspired to look deeper. And and at the pages that are within the cover, if they are excited by the cover in the first place, and that helps them decide whether they ultimately want to pick up a copy or not. And whereas, if you think about a book with a less interesting cover, it may not compel that reader to go any further. They might make up their minds upon just looking at the cover design. I also feel that, in this Instagram age, with our visual senses so deeply influenced by that platform, despite all of its shortcomings, and with all these debates that are going on about the issue of privacy, but apart from that, I do think it has perhaps led to a wider appreciation of, or at least a greater interest in the visual arts in general. And thus there is an expectation that book covers should be exciting, which is why I think it's just become very, very crucial to create thoughtful jackets.
Yeah, yeah. Teesta, you mentioned that if a book has an interesting title. Now, picking up from there, I would like to ask, what should a book cover essentially have? When I went through the whole journey, I knew for one that the book should reflect upon what you'll find inside, for sure. So that's the messaging of the book. What are your thoughts, and what are your uh, key points in terms of what one, as a designer, as an author, or and as a publisher, what should be kept in mind to get that message across?
Um, yeah, that's really interesting. In fact, I put together a stack of books to refer to for this conversation, and so I want to eventually hold up a particular book which is just typographical. There's no there's there's nothing but text on it, and yet it's an author that I discovered on looking at this cover. um, and this is to say that there isn't any one particular formula through which you can get the messaging of a book right. um, but at the same time, it's very important. I think what publishers do is that we try to make sure that a book speaks most powerfully to its main target audience, and then hopefully be able to also induct other readers into its fold. But if it fails to speak to its main audience in the first place, then that spells trouble. So for this reason, a business book will have a slightly different look from, say, political nonfiction, and the cover of a romance novel will have a very different style from the cover of a work of speculative fiction or a detective novel. So the idea is to make sure that the reader can tell by interpreting the cover what the pages within it might have to offer. And in this context, I'm reminded of this this line that stayed with me from, I'm not sure if you've seen this book, or I mean, if you've read this book, Jhumpa Lahiri's The Clothing of Books, where it's a meditation on book jackets and her relationship with cover design, where she says that the jacket is not only a book's first clothing, it's also the book's first interpretation. And as we all know, first impressions last. So yeah, I think one needs to think about the audience, although as publishers, our hope is that a book will always transcend what we think of as its target audience, but that first impression towards that target audience needs to, it needs to land correctly. So I suppose I could show two covers to compare. I've got um, this a white cover, one of my favorites of all time. It's called Ammonites and Leaping Fish. It's a memoir by Penelope Lively. It's just it's a white. It's called a naked hardback. So it doesn't have a jacket that you can remove. It's just a hardcover, and it's an embossed photo of an ammonite, which is part of the subject. It's quiet and alluring and beautiful, whereas this book, it's a work of investigative journalism
Yeah.
about the Prince of Saudi Arabia. Um, and hence it's gritty and sensational and, very, very different from this literary memoir. And I suppose when editors and designers and the authors, they all work together on the conceptualization of the cover, they would have thought about who they want the book to speak to, and that plays a big role in how you choose a book's look.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's very insightful. In fact, I have had this incident with my publisher when my book was coming out. So the publisher took about 2 to 3 months to come back to me with the first cover, and then they came back with a few options. I liked one, and we had almost finalized that, and I was, trust me, in love with that cover because I'm an artist. It was like a little abstract. Mine is a romance fiction, so it was primarily blue, and it had a heart which was half, a heart like an iceberg, half outside the water, half inside, and I loved it. And we said, okay, let's go with it. And a couple days after that, I get a call saying that, you know what, we're redoing the cover because this doesn't hit the TG. And that's exactly what you said, because they're like, this cover is not for you. This cover is not for the author. It's you loved it because you're an artist, but also because this is your first book. This should appeal to the TG. And of course, my book is targeted towards the young adults, and perhaps an abstract image on the book would be too abstract for them to even go ahead and pick it. So when you said that, the concept of a book appealing to a TG, the book cover would definitely come to the publishers, as opposed to a first time author. We learn as we move forward. So very, very interesting point there. You also showed a book that the example of the book cover, which talks about stillness, and it is like quiet. And when I asked you what's the emotion that you associate with winter, you said solitude. So would this be typically the kind of book that you as a reader would pick up uh, in winters? So my next question is, how mindful should publishers be, or authors who are self-publishing, they be uh, with the how mindful should they be with the time of the release of the book, the season at that time, and what they're designing? Has that any correlation? We're talking about colors and covers for winter. So is there a correlation? If yes, what do you think would be the ideal winter cover for a winter release?
I have to say, when I was invited to speak, at this session, I was really intrigued by the subject because I started wondering how whether the season plays a role in how I conceptualize a cover with a designer. And I wouldn't say that I do it very consciously, but then I started comparing, the various books that we publish over a whole year and across all seasons. I do see certain elements. For instance, our winter covers tend to actually be they often have bright and bold colors,
Okay.
sort of to give a sense of cheer and hope, and also to reflect the festive spirit of the time. So this is one book that it's coming out on the 22nd of January. And yeah, I would say, it has that cheerful look and colors that are normally associated with the winter festive season. So I suppose it happens at a subconscious level, because it's the cover design process is it can be quite long, as you experienced with your first book. So a book might come out in the winter, but we might start designing the cover sometimes a year,
Yeah.
6 months to a year before that book will be launched. So at the time you're not thinking too deeply about the season perhaps, but as you go along and as you get closer to the launch date, I think the book's design also gets molded in a certain way. Um, but there are books in certain genres where I wouldn't say there is a strong correlation to the season in which it might come out. For instance, again, business books, or even political books. But publishers are conscious about maybe Christmas specials, or um, I tend to see more food books or self-help books that I mean, they have a message of optimism and hope that come out during this period, when one year is ending and a new year is beginning. Those books tend to have a certain look, and they borrow from a certain color palette. Another book that we published 2 winters ago, again, like the book I had just held up, also, it's awash in the colors that we associate with winter and this period. So I suppose it depends on how the all the people that are responsible for bringing a book out into the world, and it's a whole band from authors, editors, designers, publicists, salespeople. It depends on how this whole team might interpret a particular book's relation to the season in which it is supposed to be launched. And as with many books, that correlation isn't very important, and so your design choices are influenced by other factors. um, but I think that covers can speak to our moods. I might be drawn to a book in a bookstore with a particularly stark, mysterious cover, like the Penelope Lively book that I'd shown you. If I'm feeling bluesy and I want to indulge that feeling. Whereas in the same season, if I feel that I'm in the need for upliftment, I might walk up to a more cheery looking book. And ultimately, I think publishers want to we want to publish books that have a long shelf life and endure through the
Yeah.
seasons.
Yeah.
So while it's important for a new book to get as much visibility as possible in the period in which it is being launched, and for that reason a cover needs to be designed in a certain way, um, I wouldn't say it's extremely important, as long as the design does justice to the book that it's representing.
Right, right. Uh, you know, somehow you answered the question, yet you have left us questioning the whole idea of book cover design associated with season. Now the other question that pops up in my mind is that, is it the other way around? Would a publisher choose to perhaps um, postpone, prepone, reschedule the release of a book depending on how it has come out to be, how the cover ultimately looks like? I will purely keep it to the cover. We're not talking about the book contents, in this panel. So purely on the basis of how a cover looks, because at the end of it, publishers are there in the business to sell books. So would that ever impact the decision to release a book in a particular season?
Um, in my experience, no, not yet. I
Okay.
would say that covers get influenced by everything else. So a cover needs to satisfy the needs of a book that's coming out in a particular time, or is if it's speaking to a particular moment. So if it's work of journalism and reportage that elaborates on something that's happened in the very recent past, then we wouldn't want to postpone the publication of that book, because the cover or one of the many drafts that a designer will create suggests that it might work better if it's launched in a particular period. Instead, uh, many publishers will plan certain books that come out in during various festive periods. So you might have certain books that come out around Diwali that will be on particular subjects, and then um, we recently launched a book called Desi Delicacies, which is it's a compilation of food writing from Muslim South Asia. So it has a cover that would do very well if we it would get a lot of attention if we launched it, say, around Eid, but we
Right.
didn't postpone it because the idea was to celebrate Muslim food culture across seasons and through the year. So we brought it out now, and while being aware that this is we brought it out at the end of December, which was a festive period. So we thought it to be the right season for the book to come out. And no, so we didn't wait, but we are going to perhaps run a fresh publicity campaign when Eid comes around.
Right.
But yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. So that also brings me to this question. Although you have shown us the examples of some of the books that you have with you, what would be the ideal color for a winter release? What are the best-selling colors for winter release? They could be the same. They could be different as well. So, what in your experience sells the best, and what do you perceive to be the best colors for a winter release?
Well, it's one of the great things these days in the publishing ecosystem is that we have a huge range of books, whereas, maybe some decades ago, um, there weren't as many books by Indian writers across genres, but it's not the case anymore. And because there's this plenitude of genres now, and because as we were discussing, not all genres need to carry a certain look in order to fit the season in which it is
Right.
being launched. I wouldn't say that there is a particular color or a family of colors that one needs to borrow for cover design. But that said, personally, I can tell you that I do find myself feeling drawn to lush covers in winter, perhaps because the trees around me have shed their leaves, and I'm looking for that vacuum to be filled. So I was actually going through my own library, and I realized that the books that I tend to pick out in the winter, they tend to look like this:
Wow.
lush and as if it was spring. So I
Absolutely.
suppose so maybe this is my way of correcting my seasonal affective disorder, as they say. But that's what it is. I suppose covers speak to our moods, and
Yeah.
which is why there's no particular formula. As long as it's a beautiful and thoughtfully created cover and the messaging is right, I think no matter the season, it will probably get noticed.
Yes, yes, absolutely. So well said there at the end of it. I was thinking of it. Imagine a romance book cover being designed in black, because it could be, but that would be like dark side of romance. But if there's something that is young and youthful, and you wouldn't expect the book cover to be black, or blood red, for that matter. Also, of course, depends on the kind of elements that are used across in the book that would define it. This also reminds me of, I just mentioned the tussle that we had during my book launch. That is my experience. But when I speak with a lot of my author friends, and most of them are like, you know what, we have experienced this, we have experienced this. So could you share any such incident where you guys came up with a book cover for an author, and the author would just not have it? um, if you could name the book, please name the book, and how did you resolve it? what part did you take, and how much of a say does the author have at the end of it?
If you look at a standard publishing contract, it will say that editors and publishers will create a cover in consultation with the author, but that the
Right.
ultimate decision rests with the publisher. It is the publisher's prerogative. But at least the company where I work at, Pan Macmillan India, we don't really enforce everything that's in the contract. It is a bit of a daunting document, but instead we prefer to work together with the author. And yes, sometimes there are differences of opinion, but luckily we've so far been able to resolve them peacefully. And I'm glad you asked me to mention an anecdote, because I happen to have the book where we had a difference of opinion along these lines. I have it right here with me. It's again the Tale of the Horse.
Yeah.
It's a history of the horse in India, but at the same time, it's a history of India itself through the prism of the horse, because it was a very instrumental animal when it came to influencing Indian history. I mean, so many people came into India on horseback. The horse was a really important item of trade, during the
Yeah.
period, I mean, the Silk Road era. Um, so the author, she's obviously, I mean, she's a fantastic historian who is also a horsewoman. She has a horse of her own. She goes riding. She's a proper equestrian. So she immediately wanted the figure of a horse on the cover,
Like a
like a home,
real horse.
or even a painting. But she
Okay.
wanted us to have just a horse on the cover, and we'd gone through various paintings, and we'd found, and she'd actually recommended a particular horse. I wish I'd had that draft cover with me, and it was absolutely beautiful. There is no doubt about it. But at the same time, this book is more than just a book about horses. It's actually, the more we work together on the manuscript, the more we realize that it's actually a book of human history rather than a book of equestrian history. It's more a history of India through from the vantage of the horse. And so we thought, if we only have a horse here, it's missing that human element. It needs to show the relationship between the horse and human beings. And that was our feedback to the author. She did take some time to come around to the idea. And it involved discussions with her agent, with the designer who was working on this cover. We collected votes from many colleagues in my office. She spoke to her friends and colleagues, and in the end, this is the one that had more votes. And generally, she on her own, she also, I think, warmed to the idea. And she began to think of this as the more appropriate cover.
Right.
But to sort of arrive, to sort of meet her midway, we did put a horse on the back. So everyone's happy, and we announced the book recently, and the cover has received tremendous appreciation.
It's a
So
beautiful cover. It is.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was designed by Gavin Morris, who is a fabulously talented designer.
Yes.
So yeah,
Yes.
that is my story. It has a
Yeah.
happy ending.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Any incident which was not such a happy ending, or where there was a lot more struggle, perhaps, to put your point across, and then um, understand the author's point of view. Because ultimately it's the author's baby, right? The book. Then
Mhm.
you initially, and then when it comes to the publisher, the entire team gets on board. Uh, but there is always this I have come across so many incidents where there is the author is saying one thing, the marketing team eventually
Mm-hmm.
comes back after a long time saying that, this is not going to work, which happened in my case. I had already fallen in love with the cover that was designed, and the publisher had designed it. I mean, I had nothing to do with the cover, but they went through my works and sort of, came up with this design that complemented my abstraction with the story that I had written. And then once I had fallen, I think I took about 2 months to even get back to them and say that, okay, what you're saying makes sense, because we had so many calls. And then I also went around asking. So my story has a happy ending too, because at the end of it, the book cover did receive a lot of good reviews. From my friends and family and from readers, eventually, they have all loved the cover. But any place where there's a stalemate that you remember, and then how did you resolve that?
Honestly, I don't think there's been such a case. Definitely no acrimony. It depends on how you are able to explain to the author, because I mean, cover design is just it requires such a different skill set from writing a book. And the role of the cover is not to simply make the book look beautiful or attractive, but to also, as we were discussing, to also convey the right message about the book to a certain readership. And in order to get all those things right, one needs to sometimes sacrifice certain aspects of certain creative aspects, which, of course, doesn't make authors happy always, especially
Right.
authors who are also artists. But I think, I mean, in my experience, again, a lot of authors who might not be completely pleased with the cover drafts we show them in the beginning, uh,
Yeah.
they do start to realize, um, that as publishers and salespeople and publicists, we do have a deeper understanding of the market. And in order
Absolutely.
for the book to get noticed in that space, um, it's the message of the cover that's extremely important. So yeah, no acrimony. There've
Okay.
always been
All right.
happy resolutions.
Good to hear that all ends well at the end of it. We have a question that we'll take. Although I have one more question for you that we'll take after this one. So Coral here asks, irrespective of the season, do you have a favorite dominating color for book covers, or a book covers that is your absolute favorite?
Huh. Um, I have a strange one with me when it comes to absolute favorites. And I wouldn't say it's the most wonderful cover design, but it's the one that I was talking about earlier. It's just text. It's a typographical cover. It's one of the early works of the Italian writer Italo Calvino. It's called Marco Valdo. And the reason I put it at the top of my stack is because this is how I discovered Italo Calvino. I was browsing in a bookstore looking for something new to read because I had gone through everything at home. And this uh, just called out to me, and I just picked it up, read the blurb after looking at the cover, and I just brought it home. And after I finished this book, I read nearly everything that Calvino has written. And I've often wondered why that happened. One reason would be that I am drawn to quiet covers that have, something mysterious about them, which makes me want to find out more. Um, but yeah, I wouldn't say it's my favorite cover design, but I often wonder about really talented designers who are able to create cover art, which on the face of it might not be splendid, but they are able to speak to your psyche, I suppose, in a way
Right.
that you wouldn't be able to decipher. And I think covers of that kind really stand out for me, which is why I picked up this one as well. And I have another favorite. I don't have the book with me, but another one of my absolute favorites is Helen Oyeyemi's book of short stories called "What Is Not Yours Is Not Yours." And again, it's actually quite similar to this one. It's a white hardcover with just a rose in the center, and the title is sort of entwined around it in gold folding.
Wow.
Um, yeah, but at the same time, I think I also tend to swing between extremes. So while I like these quiet, alluring covers, I'm also drawn to beautiful, lush covers, such as this one. So yeah,
But
that would
perhaps
be my.
it's something to do with the state of mind that you're in at a particular time to
Yeah,
choose a book
I
cover.
suppose so. I suppose
Yeah,
so.
yeah, yeah. All right. We'll move on to the next question, which is if there's a book on the history of winter sports, are publishers likely to go with a cover that has the image of a Nordic village or ski resort that communicates the mood of the sport, or would they like to go with the images of champion athletes, considering it to be more eye-catching? So, is it, an abstract image of a village versus a known face, perhaps, representing that sport? I think that's what the question is.
I mean, obviously, first of all, it would depend on which country that book is going to be launched in, and whether that sport is a popular sport in that country. Um, from a marketing point of view, if it's a book about athletes, famous athletes, then it would make commercial sense to have
Yeah.
photographs of those athletes um, on the cover. But that would also be that would also not be an unusual cover. It would be predictable and expected. So if a publisher is an adventurous one, then they might actually make it a make it more symbolic, and maybe pick out an aspect of that sport and just have that on a very minimalist sort of design. So one could go many ways, but it's so subjective, cover design. But at the end, it's a balancing act between the commercial needs of a book, as well as artistic sensibilities.
This brings me to a question, Tista, that I have always wondered. Um, I have often noticed that when a second, third, fourth edition of a book is released, and we are talking about books that older books that are very popular and have great numbers. Often book covers are changed for these books, and various editions have various book covers. So, what drives this decision from the publishers? Is it the ownership of the book cover that would have been with the previous publisher, or is it purely changing with the times?
Yeah, I mean, that's really interesting. Again, one of the covers that I'd included here is Chitra Banerjee's The Palace of Illusions, which is, it's been a bestseller for the last 10 or more years. And this is actually a new edition. This is the book's 10th anniversary edition, which we brought out 2 years ago. But the cover is not different. When the book was launched, it had come out with this cover. What we did was turn it back into a hardcover. It had been out in paperback all these years. So we reintroduced the hardcover, and I'll just open the jacket up to show you. We sort of made it look, more special, and because it was going to clothe a special limited edition. We'd printed 1,000 copies of the hardcover, which the author had signed. So we needed to make it stand out. So I think so that's one reason to give a book new clothing, because it's a special edition. You're celebrating a milestone. The book's done really well for 10 years and you want to celebrate that. And sometimes there are books that become hugely successful and they become modern classics. And they might have done well for 30 or 40 years, but as you said, one might need to modernize its look, which is exactly why this book looks very different now. This is a new cover.
Yeah.
When it had first come out, it looked very different. So it's part of the vintage classic series. So yeah, I mean there are all these reasons uh, to rejacket book covers every few years.
Right. Thank you. Uh, I have two more questions and then I think we should wrap. How different is the process for designing covers for classic literature in comparison to modern literature? Um, how difficult or easy is it to do that?
It's, I mean, there are no set rules, but I think there's more room for experimentation when it's modern literature, or when it's a new book as opposed to a classic, because the classic would have already sort of set the tone for how the cover needs to look. So you base, and also when you rejacket classics, they're often part of a series, just like this one is a part of the vintage classic series, where all the covers, no matter who the author is, will have a similar look. So I would imagine that any other author who was published under this series, their books would also have these typographical covers. Whereas when it's a completely new book, it's really up to the publisher and the designer and the author to decide the kind of impression they want to create. So yeah, I would say there's more room for experimentation, and thus it's possibly more pleasurable.
Yes, yes. Yeah, I mean, you can just go about with creating what you would want to, like a blank canvas.
Mhm.
The last question we'll take is that it's a very interesting question. Read it some time back. Has it ever happened that the cover art or design prompted changes in the book, having inspired the author?
That's a wonderful question, and the answer is yes. And once again, I happen to have the book where it took place, and it's The Tale of the Horse, where you won't be able to see it here, but if you ever pick up a copy and take a close look at the cover, it doesn't just depict, there's this prince and a dancing girl who are out riding. I believe this is in Jasrota, in Kashmir. But in the backdrop, you probably won't be able to make out, but there are these people who are out walking with their dogs, who
Okay.
represent the common people of the village. Um, and once we had decided that this was going to be the book's cover, this was when most of the work on the manuscript was complete, but the author was yet to write her epilogue. Um, and she decided to include a note about this painting in her epilogue. And because this is a history of India that also takes a very close look at the relationship, not just between the horse and its owner, and they would often be kings and queens and people with a lot of privilege. She also decided to take a look at the grooms and the farriers and the stable boys, and all these ordinary people that seem to not feature in grand works of history. And so she wrote this beautiful note about the people of the common people of these village after we'd finalized the book cover.
Wow.
So
Wow.
yeah, it did
Yeah,
have an influence on the
that's
content.
so interesting. That's so interesting. And um, yeah, I think that I'm definitely going to pick pick the book now because I just so feel connected to it since you have spoken about it. So this also, I mean, we have finished within time. Tista, I would like you to say, your final words in terms of book covers. What should one be cautious of? The authors as well as publishers. What is that one non-negotiable aspect of a book cover that you would tell? What is that one aspect?
Um, well, the main aspect is that a book cover ultimately has to attract readers to the book, and thus there is no right. There is no perfect book cover for a book, but a successful cover is usually the outcome of a happy collaboration between an author and everyone who's responsible for bringing out their book. So I think it's important to be open-minded, not just about the need for the book to look beautiful, but also for all these various commercial aspects that one simply has to keep in mind. I mean, even with this book, we were very upset about having to place a barcode box on top of this horse, but it had to be done because it's going to help us sell the book. And if we don't do it, then it's wasted effort to some extent. So yeah, I would say be open-minded and try to have a great time working together as a team.
Yes, thank you so much. Yes, that's wisdom indeed. I think at both ends, both parties should come collaborate as one, and that's when a successful book is produced. Thank you so much for your time for this discussion. I wish we could go on and on and on because I had so many more points to discuss. But this was very helpful and insightful. Thank you so much, Tista. Thank you,
Thank you.
audience, for joining. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.